just hopefully you'll get to explore everything that's on display, because it is truly unique. In terms of national programs, this is truly a unique experience that your children are getting to have. And that's one of the two themes that I really want you to leave with, if you leave nothing else today, is that you and your children, and when I say children, I don't know if you're students here, but young adults, should really get that in their mindset when they go to visit schools, that what they are doing is so far above the norm, whether they are involved in any of the specific research projects that are going on, or they're just matriculating through the typical here at Cambridge, the science track. I'm not a science person, and I found out as we went through this experience that this is so rare and so special, and you'll hear all the daunting statistics about the demographic boom that's going on. You'll hear it from our wonderful college counseling partner. You'll hear it at every info session you go to. Realize that just by participating in some of the things that are offered here, your children have set themselves apart in a very special way. And when I say that, I mean in terms of Harvard or Duke or Brown, you know, the list goes on and on. Deans and department heads who are in awe of what's happening here. So that's one thing that really is a helpful mindset to have for your kids to have when they are articulating or communicating what's going on. They really should be capable of doing that at this age. And when I say this age, I'm talking about kids who are actively in the process of looking at colleges. The second thing that's really an important thing is creating opportunities, and we're going to talk about some tactical ways to do that. You hear that all the time, but these kids need to learn this life lesson now, and they'll use that lesson for their thesis, for lab opportunities, research programs, graduate school applications, certainly for job searches down the road. So hi, welcome. There's snacks in the back. I'll just throw that out. So those are the two overriding things. This is unique experience that they're having, and secondly, they need to be able to create their own opportunities. They're going into a much bigger ocean now that they're leaving this their time. Okay, so I'm going to try to get through this. I tend to talk fast, and I'm trying to use that to my advantage today, but definitely slow me down, because I'd like to get through things that I wish someone had shared with our family before we had gone through this process. Things that we learned through successes, things that we learned through crash and burn experiences. And everybody has those, but you draw from those. So first thing, pre-visit. Now I'm going to assume, and we can talk about this at the end if we have time, that you have a list of colleges that you want to visit, and that somehow has been created. And you're now actively planning those visits. You need to consider all the visits equally important, but my suggestion would be do not start with your dream schools, the reach schools, the schools you're most excited about. Those are the ones you're going to build up to. This is an ideal situation logistically that might not be possible with travel plans, etc., but if you can, work up to those. We'll talk about that in a second. Go on, your kids should really, I'm going to reiterate this is your high schoolers' responsibility. It is their project. You are there in so many key ways as parents, and I may be talking to both parents and students at the same time, but as parents, we really need for them to understand early in the process, this is their responsibility. So once that list of schools is created, finding out if you need to register for information sessions and tours is step one, and getting the itinerary plan. The next step is for your student to really research online, and some of this may sound obvious, but we'll talk more about it. So research the departments that they are interested in at that university very well, and to be able to have a very intelligent conversation about the school, because there's nothing that turns someone off at the school than being asked questions that are easily answered on the website. That's just like a fatal error, and you can just see them gloss over the first time they're asked a basic question, because their time's valuable. They've got a lot of kids who want to meet with them. So that's your child's responsibility. They're the ones who are going to be having these conversations. Make sure they're really up to speed. So you're going to register an information session and the tours if necessary. And then the key step is setting up interviews within the department. Certainly you want to try to set up an interview with the admissions office if possible. Sometimes these things don't happen. But if possible, as early in advance as you can, have them email them if you set the interview, and also email a faculty member in the department or departments that they are interested in. So many times you can try for the dean, that email gets passed around, somebody gets back to you eventually. If not, you need to follow up on that. Many times there's a faculty member, a faculty advisor who is given the mission and the responsibility for talking to prospective students. So someone should get back to you. But again, if they don't, the student needs to follow up. Before going to the campus, kids in the sciences really need to have a curriculum, vitae, a CV. A resume is as important, but a CV in the sciences, as many of you probably know, is the only professional representation of what you've done. It would be like us going to a job interview with a resume written on a napkin. You really need to make sure they show up for faculty interviews in the science departments with a CV. Now, many of them have never even created a resume or a CV. There are so many faculty members, especially in the science department and in the college counseling department, that can really help them with this. And it's an editing process just like anything else. They will have, and perhaps when they're going to the school, my daughter, for example, interviewed for creative writing and neuroscience. She had tailored, and a few other things. She had tailored resumes for creative writing and for the sciences. She had a CV for the sciences. So a CV, if you're not familiar with that, is a very detailed representation, very concise, but it really gets to the heart of what you've done in your science experience here. And that's what they will expect you to be very conversant about, to be able to articulate and to demonstrate in this document. That document can be passed around, so it's very important. And they'll need to update that, but I would highly suggest that they work with the faculty here. Almost any of the teachers in the science department would be happy to help them with that. By the way, jump in with any questions you have. Thank you. Sure. And if you Google it, you'll see many, many different forms of it. I think it's, at this age, it's definitely good to talk to folks who work on presenting a high schooler's achievement. It will cover research, the scientific skills that they have. It won't get into the things that aren't on it are sports, languages, hobbies. That's a resume. This is a very much more a poster sessions. Certainly any research projects they've been on, their current science curriculum path, if you will. It's much more of a focused scientific presentation that is expected. That in that world, that is de rigueur, and that's really an important thing for them to have. It shows their level of professionalism, which even in 11th and 12th grade, that's what you're expected to have in terms of your interpersonal skills, your CV, a lot of them talk about. But I would just highly suggest talking to the faculty, because sometimes when you go online and Google them, they're really not appropriate for someone at this age. Okay, so we're going to email the faculty members and the admissions department. In those emails, you can easily say, my family is planning to be on campus on X date and attend just to save yourself some head, attend the admissions info session and do the tour, and I would love to meet with you if possible that day, because you're letting them know up front that you're booked in the morning. So they're not going to say, you'll do what you have to do, but ideally you're going to get that schedule worked out. I would highly suggest as well that if possible, only do one school a day. As we talk about everything that you really need to absorb and follow up on and prepare for, it's a lot. So sometimes that's not an option, but if possible, I would highly suggest that. So you're going to read everything on the school's website, on the department's website, understand the way any particular department is structured, because in each school it can be very different. Many schools have sub-departments within, say, the life sciences. If possible, you'd like to meet with a faculty member in maybe a sub-department if your student is very focused in that particular area, because obviously the demand for time among those folks is less than the demand for time for the overriding department faculty advisor. So your student really needs to have a list of questions prepared for those interviews in order of priority, with a font big enough that they can look down at it without having to stare. I will share a crash and burn story. The very first interview my daughter did, I guess I just really didn't stop and think about how little experience she had ever had interviewing, you know, outside of paying grade or beyond part-time jobs. It was painful. I mean, just so painful, and it really was an eye-opener because she didn't have the questions in her head going into the room. She didn't have a really laid out priority. She was trying to listen, but then she completely blanked out and shoved up your papers, and you could just see the person on the other side of the table just, you know, zoning out. So this is a learning experience. That's why I would highly suggest you don't start with your dream schools. Let them get some.
So were you there in the room during the interview?
I'll talk about that. I was, in some cases, but I really was a fly on the wall. And we'll talk about the parents' role is as important as the student's role in those situations, because you can really create issues that you don't need to create at all possible. It's a great question. I want to come back to that, so thank you. That's a key point. They need to bring a pad, obviously, a pen, multiple copies of their CD, and multiple copies of their resume. Okay. Dress, and some of this is common sense, but you know, sometimes you're shocked when you see what kids do. They need to be dressed, even in schools that they're not very excited about, very presentably as a professional, because first impressions are really, as we know, something that's hard to undo, and they can run into faculty in the dining halls, at night, at restaurants in the local area. You just never know. So when we talk about creating opportunities, you don't want that opportunity to come up in sweatpants. And I mean, I love sweatpants, it's such a thing, but they really need to up their game when they're on campus and near the campus. Okay. So the visit, you're going to arrive early and register if you need to so that their visit's recorded. And this gets into something that's going to hold true for their whole college experience. When the information session begins, ideally they will sit within the line of sight from the speaker's podium, or where the speaker's going to be positioned. You can usually tell when you walk into the auditorium. They really need to be somewhere where there can be some nonverbal communication going on between them. You're going to most likely be with your children. Even during the info session, they need to really be aware of their body language. They need to be engaged. Certainly don't need to be on their phone, right? You need to be engaged. You need to be nodding when you're in agreement, looking, just having that engagement with the speaker. Because many times that speaker can be someone you have the opportunity to talk to afterwards. And you're going to hopefully get a contact name or a number, or find out what region they read in terms of applications, or what department they may focus on. Some schools are set up that way. It's really important that your student takes the notes during the information session. Not head down the entire time, but that they take notes at each school during the information session. Some of it's generic stuff, but this is really going to be helpful stuff when it comes to writing their resume, writing your essays. And they're going to forget this stuff, and it's so much easier when you have something to go back to. And we're going to talk about continuing to take notes during an interview with a faculty member. Lesson learned, do not take the entire college road trip notebook with you to each college, because if you leave it in a bathroom and someone nice enough finds it and nails it back to you, you feel very fortunate, because all of that information that you're going to turn to when it's essay writing time is lost. And so really just take the few pages you need out of your car, or out of your house, but treat that as precious information, because you're really going to look back and thank yourself for that. The students need to be taking notes. The students need to take ownership of this process. The students also need to be able to ask some coherent questions, not at every info session. A lot of it's redundant information, there's staggering demographics of the baby boom, et cetera. But there will be questions, and they need to be able to focus. Certainly as parents, there's questions that you're going to have, but really encourage your students to be responsible and involved enough to be asking questions and taking their notes. So many times I see parents taking the notes, and the kids are really just trying to stay awake. The admissions office sees that too. And it's just, in terms of setting precedent, it's not, you do not, as parents, want to take ownership of this decision. Because every time something inevitably goes off the rails their first year, it'll be your responsibility, and you don't want that. They have to have complete buy-in. So it starts at the beginning, just setting that tone. And if there's a specialized tour, let's see, take note of the speakers. Again, if there's someone that's up at the podium that you can follow up with because they're from your area, they spoke about your department, you want to have that information. At the end of the info session, many times there's an opportunity to come up just to ask questions one-on-one. A lot of times the tours are getting ready to take off. But if there's someone, you have to make a judgment call, if there's someone here that you really think is a valuable contact with your student, get them up there. You can go on another tour. Usually there's tours in the afternoon. Get them up there. That contact is valuable. Try to get a card or an email or something out of them. Try to really get your student, and this, when I say you, I mean your student. Your student should have a meaningful question kind of in their hip pocket to bring up to this person almost at every college, so that they're not just standing there, just for no reason, no apparent reason. Make it a meaningful interaction that the person's going to remember after your student leaves. Okay, so that's pretty much, if there's a tour at the science department, some schools offer that, I think Columbia offers that, definitely take advantage of that, because you do want to see the facilities, and you can do the general tour obviously as well, but if there's a specialized tour, of course, take advantage of that. Okay, now to the interviews, and this really is focusing primarily on the interview with the science faculty member. But a lot of this crosses over, to any interview. The student is, you and your student, let's say, show up for the interview, and many times the student should introduce you, because that's just good manners, and that's just gracious, and that's what they should be doing throughout this experience. But the faculty members may say to you, well, would you like to come in? And it's really important to not appear as the parent who's really running the show, that you're really in the background. And your background role is critical, but you're in the background. You may say, well, if that's okay, or not, I intended to, or I'm there. Just kind of feel it out. It's great if you can go in for the first few faculty interviews with your student. Your student needs, beyond introducing himself or herself and you, as you go into the office, handing them a CV saying, this is my CV, this is my resume. Many times they just hand them a bunch of paper and don't even acknowledge what was just given. But that's going to be something they'll probably sit out during the interview, and you'll refer to that. Your student should be versed enough, and that should be current enough, that they recall the order in which they put things on the CV. So you're going to hand that to them. The parents need to fade into the background. You really need, with your body language, to just be out of the equation as much as possible. It's really to your child's benefit. They're going to remember the interaction with the child, not the parent. You can be there in a crash and burn situation to just kind of, maybe throw out a leading question about Johnny or Susie's experience. I'm a very non-scientific person, so it's very easy for me to say, I really don't understand this stuff, but wasn't there something you did with things glowing, or and it really sounded so so out of the realm of the world that they operate in, that I think it would just be a trigger though for my daughter to say, oh, that's right, we did this, and that would lead into conversations that they could relate to. So if you are vocal at all, it really should just be under those circumstances, less than quick, unless it's a crash and burn that get involved. Body language for your student is so important, and for you in this case. The body language, they need to be obviously leaning forward a little. They need to have great eye contact, but not scary eye contact. They need to be listening to what they're hearing, and then be able to follow up with questions, but not have to start flipping through their questions because they're telling you to throw off the track. And that's going to happen probably in the first interview. Your body language needs to be, just someone who's just melted into the background, but you need to be listening so carefully as well, because you're going to help just with the recall of what was said. There's a lot going on, and it really does help just to have somebody help recount what occurred so you can make notes on it. And they shouldn't feel compelled to follow a script. They can always follow up in an email or something, things they feel like, oh, you forgot. It's not the end of the world, but what's really important is what's happening in that room at that point. And some good things to discuss for my daughter. And by the way, I'm sorry, I have a daughter who went through this program as it was exploding, who's now a sophomore at Harvard in the sciences. And by the way, that was her first interview when she was 16, and she crashed and burned. It was horrible. It was early on, and so that was definitely one. And now she came back and did the process as a junior, and it was so much better because she had a lot more experience under her belt, but it was cringeworthy. So, you know, she did, this was early, you know, so and then I have a daughter who's a freshman, in fact, embarrass her. And in the 8 years that I've been involved in this program, it has just exploded. And it really has just, you know, we're so, you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg, you know, just talking about what's going on today. These kids are out doing so many important things that I feel like in 10, 20 years, we're going to find out these were the kids who discovered the next earth-shattering, you know, groundbreaking discovery. So, some good things to discuss in these interviews. The general timing and accessibility of research for undergraduates. Some schools will encourage kids to jump in right off the bat, and some are going to suggest that they wait until starting to work in labs when they're sophomores or juniors. Okay, thank you. What's everything comes up? So that's, you know, so the timing getting involved and how getting involved in a lab works. Do you need to reach out to a faculty member? Are there group, you know, lab classes? So those are good questions. What is the thesis writing like in the department? You know, how many students are writing thesis? What type of work are they covering? And when does the process begin? Is the thesis mandatory? Just the whole concept of thesis is a good conversational, you know, topic for these interviews. If you're interested in medicine, how do the requirements for the major and undergrad align with the pre-med requirements in most schools? And how do pre-med students in the department seem to fare? What kind of people who major in that department go on to do that after college? You know, what type of grad school or jobs, et cetera, has the department experienced in recent years? If you're interested in double majoring, ask how that works, because some departments won't allow it. And how minoring in a related field versus an unrelated field would affect you. For example, science plus math and science versus science plus humanities. Sometimes it's hard to make that work out within your system. So, you know, upfront, if that's really an important, you know, topic for your child, if they want to be in neuroscience and creative writing, is that even an option? Show interest and find a way to bring up any important science experience they've had here, research, internships, obviously, and conversation. This is so important. I cannot tell you how many times faculty members were amazed at what was going on at the high school level here. And this is by the junior. I'm sure many of you are having this experience, but it's really gratifying. You know, we're in this little bubble. Sometimes we just don't know how good it is until we get out and get some context and perspective from the outside world and from big institutions. So that was a marvelous discovery. Once your students are accepted into school, which will happen, and they have interviews with a faculty member on campus, make sure they reach out to that faculty member to say to them, I'm here, thank you so much, I'm very excited, because that's a contact they'll have for a long time. That's an important beginning contact. And it's a very small world. Many of these faculty members that they're going to run into, they may run into during collaborations, they change institutions, graduate school perhaps, you just never know. So none of this is time wasted. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's not time wasted. So we talked about the campus visit. I'm really going to roll through this. Making sure they go on the tour. Life is so much more than the science program. And make sure you understand the humanities or the non-science academic requirements, because sometimes it's really hard to work that out with any majors that they may want. Extracurriculars are going to be a big part of their life. And safety and geography, Adar brought this up. Really understand, usually the science departments may be congregated in a section of the campus that's separate from a lot of the other buildings, and if your child at a lab at night or has courses at odd hours, which happens, they're going to be commuting back and forth, you know, not typical times. So they really want to understand, you know, from a safety perspective, what that means. And that's another question you can ask in the science area or in the admissions office. When you are on campus and you have that map and you find the science buildings, even if you didn't have an interview, wander through the science buildings. This is the great opportunities. Anyone that's older than your student should be considered a possible contact. Say hello, have eye contact with everyone. Sometimes, hypothetically, someone could walk out of a locked building and you could walk in before the door closed, and you could run into people who were doing really cool lab work. Now, everybody at Pingree would suggest you do that, but if that ever hypothetically happened, you could get the opportunity to see some really sophisticated stuff that some other people don't get to see, probably because the building's locked. But just by showing up in department offices and saying, having your students say, I'm here on campus, I'm interested in this major, do you have any material on it? Is there anybody I can talk to? My daughter got an hour with the Dean of Medicine, Brown, that we were told later by her assistant, that her own students don't, her own advisees don't get. Just because she showed up and there was some free time over the summer, and it was just, she talked to her as a mother of 5, as the dean of the medical school, as a woman in science. It was invaluable. She ended up talking to the dean of a new neuroscience program at Duke through the same thing, showing up in the office, saying, this is who I am. And that dean stayed in touch with her for over a year as he was designing experiments for his graduate class, because he was working them off of experiments that she had done here, which was really telling. So they just kept in touch. Post-visit, I'm going to jump real quickly. Post-visit, as soon as you're leaving the campus, 2 emails get written, and hopefully your child will do this in the car, and they're going to be drained, mentally and physically drained. But they need to immediately write a thank you note to both the faculty member, because the recency factor, cementing that visit in their mind, and the admissions officer, if they did have those meetings. But in either case, they're going to cross-reference the other person. Because ideally, you're going to say to the faculty member, I really enjoyed my visit, this is what I got out of my visit, I'm very excited about this. You might share something a little personal that you discovered, like enjoy your weekend and wherever with your family, but keep it to the point where they would be comfortable sending that email through to other faculty members, not something that'll prevent them from doing it. But in that email, you're going to say, I also enjoyed my tour and meeting with the admissions director, blah, 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 and so that they can easily forward that email to the admissions office with a little header, said, met with this student, had a lovely, it'd make it easy for them to help your child stand apart. Just getting that one email in there may make that application different from the other 19,000 applications. File away your notes of this, we talked about that. Sleep as much as possible. You need to fire on all cylinders. You need to have great recall, and you need to be very engaged. So if you and your children are cranky and tired and very draining, that's not going to happen. So it's easier said than done, but really be realistic about how much work this is. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Try all the food trucks. That's my best part. My best memory. Take pictures. Parents roll real quick. Help your children remember what just happened in that meeting if they forget something you're writing down. Don't talk about anything else. Let them get those notes written. You may have to prod for them to follow up. If anyone has to go, just please help yourself. And my philosophy is you don't give your opinion in the beginning. Through all the college visits, you ask leading questions perhaps, but you don't state your opinion. It has to be your journey, it has to be ownership of the decision. You're going to be together a lot, they're going to ask you for your opinion, you're going to just maybe answer that with a leading question. If there's something that's really bothering you, try to ask a question that'll help your student perhaps look at that particular aspect of the experience that you noted. And I'm sorry,